been involved in quite a few tech companies. And what I've really realized is that there's a tidal wave of convenience that's crashed over the entire world.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm Austin Hare, and our guest is Dr. Bryan Laskin. He's the founder of Upgrade Dental, which is an educational platform that teaches dental offices and DSOs how to grow their practices by putting patients first. He's been in the dental industry for 22 years, and he's owned his own practice for 19 years. And he's got his hand in a lot of different dental tech companies. So it's very exciting to have you on the show today, Bryan. How you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Yeah. So, all right. I like to, just get started from a macro, 1,000-foot overview, aside from dental, before dental, who was Bryan? Like what were you doing? Like, what was it like for you growing up? Were you creating, any kind of side hustles and businesses? Like, what were your parents like? I mean, what was the first thing that kind of got you on this path?
Well, great question, which I don't put a lot of thought into, but I think I like to say I was born in the year 1972, which is the same year that Pong was created. So video games and Bryan Laskin were created in the same year. And I think that's appropriate because I've always loved technology. I've always loved games, video games, and I've always been a gigantic nerd. And so that kind of put me on a path towards both nerding out about dentistry and about technology, which is kind of one of my favorite things. And I've also had a weird inclination towards business. When I was 12 years old, I had never even probably seen a baby, but the only job I could think of was babysitting. So I went around the neighborhood and put little postcards in everybody's mailbox saying that I would babysit for them for, I think it was $1.75 an hour. And I was not worth it. I was a garbage babysitter, but a couple people hired me. And then from then on, I've just always loved, kind of having my own business, which was a focus of mine. I love healthcare. I love helping people and working with my hands and technology. And so I've been able to sort of create this whirlwind of a career that's been able to incorporate all of those things that I love to do.
So how long did the babysitting gig go on for?
I think I did it for about 2 years. And I literally left the mac and cheese on a stove and fell asleep. And the parents came home to just some totally crusty, burnt macaroni that probably had to throw the pan away. And then I think they knew and I knew that was probably the end of, until I had children of my own, which I don't think I screwed that one up so bad.
That's funny. That's funny. So, okay. And then how did that translate into dentistry and getting in that path?
Yeah, I've always loved drawing. I love playing guitar. I love martial arts. I love doing things with my hands. And so I actually took a year off after college to figure out what I wanted to do. And I put a lot of thought and effort into it. And I would have, if you told me that I was right when I graduated that I was going to go to dental school, I would have told you you're insane. But after looking into it, I just took all the things that I loved and together. I could have my own business, which is why I didn't go to medical school. I thought it would be more difficult. There's a lot of innovation that goes on in dentistry, and you help people directly every day, which was important to me. And you get to use and work with your hands. And so that was kind of what led me to dentistry. And then quickly,
were you a good student in high school and college?
In high school and college, I did well, but it would be disingenuous to say I was a good student. I didn't study. I think it came naturally to me. So when I went to dental school, I had a rude awakening. I actually had to I was dating my now wife, and she was a senior in college when I started dental school. And she had to basically teach me how to study because I'd never done it before. So in college, because I can understand things fairly well. So I was one class away from an engineering major. And so I took a lot of math and science, things that I think you could kind of figure out if you knew if you could process information that way. But in dental school, there was a lot of memorization, like gross anatomy, and that you can't just figure out what things are. So you actually do have to study. And so for me, that was a rude awakening. And I literally had to, so I did very well in grade wise, but I was not a good student.
Okay. So then, you know, like, it sounds like that was you mentioned a rude awakening. So like, you know, did you have to like structure your day better? Did you just, you know, essentially pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get motivated? Like, I mean, what actually happened? Was there any actual like tangible changes that happened in your life?
Yeah, I think I got smacked in the face with some bad initial grades in dental school, and then I figured out, well, this isn't going to work if I want to be a dentist, and so I just had to. I kind of ground through. Really, what I found is that I can memorize things if I write them down. So that's how I learned. That's how I learned gross anatomy. Was I just wrote everything down. And I did well in dental school. I was sort of like middle of the pack, but for me, dental school did not come easily for me because I think everything up to dental school had. So I had to really learn how to study, and I also didn't. It wasn't exactly a supportive environment. Let me put it that way, right? Dental school when I went there was very much like boot camp, and I have an aversion to authority figures, and so I had it was a bit of oil and water me in dental school. I love learning, but I also don't like being tested. So it was, you're bringing back like the challenges, right, of dental school, which really has affected the career to date, because I think in dental school, rightfully so, the focus is so much on perfectionism, right? Dentists have to perform at a very high level in very difficult situations. So there's a very much a focus on trying to strive for perfection in your clinical quality, but that comes at I believe the expense of paying attention to the patient that you're working on, because if you absorbs patient's anxiety, it makes you less effective at the job that you're performing. And so that has really been, and that's kind of the essence of the Patient First Manifesto book, is that is what I call the great disconnect between dental patients and dental and just healthcare professionals in general and their patients, is we get so focused on producing a quality result that we do not pay attention to the experience that the patient's having. Yeah,
I know we talked about this earlier, but that kind of reminds me, like, what's a commonly held belief in the dental industry that you disagree with?
Well, it's the commonly held belief that's analogous to what I just said, is that if you produce exceptional dentistry, you'll have a successful practice. And in reality, there's very little correlation between the quality of the care you give and the health of your practice. And I think that's true of healthcare in general. Of course, if you produce horrific quality, that has a negative effect on your practice, right? But patients, by and large, cannot distinguish between good care and exceptional care. And so, this isn't saying this is good or bad. This is just the way it is. Other factors go into what allows your practice to be financially healthy than the quality of care that you deliver.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think in Freakonomics they actually address the same thing. It's like they're trying to figure out what's the correlation between doctors and getting sued. And what happened was, it didn't come down to the amount of times you messed up, because there's like doctors, the people that got sued had a whole wide range of track record between being like pristine and almost perfect to extremely bad, right? And what they realized, the one common metric that determined whether or not they were going to get sued as a doctor was amount of time spent in the room with the patient. And so what it boiled down to is kind of what you're saying, which is the patient experience. Do they like you? Are you spending time? Are you being a jerk? Are you giving them enough time to answer questions and feel understood? And that was the single most determining factor of whether or not they're going to have a malpractice case on their hands.
Yeah, I think that's I haven't heard that from Freakonomics, but it sounds very true, obviously, and communication skills are huge. I would guess if I were to place if I had to bet on what was the single most common factor as to whether or not a dental practice got sued, it would be what their financial arrangements look like, right? So even in addition to in place of the communication skills that you have as a provider, are you being transparent with the financial arrangements, which has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of care? Just communication kind of does, but more specifically, I would say financial arrangements in dentistry, I think oftentimes are overlooked. Which then again, it's a more specific, I think, aspect of patient communication that I think would be.
And it sounds like your book, The Patient First Manifesto, talks about that, which I want to get to that soon. But first, I want to figure out. So you went to dental school, got your butt kicked a little bit, then you got out, and then what happened next? Did you become associate, and did you always know that you wanted to open up your own practice? Was that just a means to an end, or did the goal of having your own practice come later?
No, I knew right away that I wanted to have my own practice, but I had absolutely no confidence in my skills coming out of dental school. So I went and I worked for a large group for a little over a year, and then I bought a very small practice. Literally the smallest practice I could find was 800 square feet, because
Wow.
I felt like if I bought a larger practice, I wouldn't be able to handle it, which in retrospect was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the size of your practice. You still have to run the thing, right? But I bought an 800 square foot practice, and I think what has led to me being successful in dentistry is I have been constantly learning. My very first practice, I had one receptionist, I had one hygienist, and I had one assistant. And I had them train me on every single thing they did. So I knew what they did. Not because I wanted to tell them what to do, but I was so worried that if they left, I would have to train somebody else.
Yeah.
And it was actually very great information. And the very first thing I did was hire a consultant. And I've always worked with coaches ever since then. I actually just met with a coach today. I've been constantly learning and trying to grow from there. So for me, dental school was the beginning of my education. And I think that's really what's allowed me. It's grown from 800 square feet to 8,000 square feet. And I had another location.
Wow. 8,000 square feet. That's huge.
Yeah. We have, 4 general dentists, oral surgeon. At one point we had an orthodontist. It's been great. And, I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn every day. Right.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So you started out with 800 square feet. When you were buying the practice, was the real estate involved at all, or was it just an operational purchase?
No, it was an operational purchase, and that's being generous to the operations that I was purchasing.
Yeah, you're pretty much buying the book of patience, right? But so then, how did you start growing that? Did you take down space next door, or did you have to relocate? What did that process look like?
Yeah, I've relocated a couple times. The first relocation, I had this tiny office, and where the patients had very much patchwork dentistry, so I could count on at least one person breaking a tooth and coming in during the day, because there was a lot of dental needs in the patient base. And then I purchased another practice from a dentist that I got to know very well, who was a total master craftsman. He would only produce exceptional dentistry and only produce idealized dentistry on patients that would accept it, which meant he had a tiny practice. So he had a practice that was probably 15% of the size from a patient-based standpoint, but he had a beautiful location. And so I moved my tiny practice into his larger practice, and it almost sunk the entire thing because I paid so much for this practice, thinking that, I made the mistake of thinking that because he was an exceptional dentist and had a beautiful space, that the business was sound. And I didn't do it at that time. I didn't know the due diligence that I should be doing. And so I immediately smacked into another wall and realized, oh, that's where I came with it. Producing exceptional dentistry does not equal healthy practice. Producing dentistry produces a healthy practice, right?
I feel like there's a lot of lessons that we can unpack here. So what he was doing right was the actual clinical chairside work. I mean, it sounds like you said it was exquisite and it was perfect. What was he doing wrong exactly?
I think what he was doing, and it's hard to say he was doing it wrong, right? Because he had a great practice, a great boutique practice. However, what we did differently, and we treatment planned the same. I mean, we looked at dentistry the same way, and he taught me a ton about how to deliver the care. But we looked at dentistry the same way. However, we presented treatment very differently to patients. He would present everything as being ideal and necessary, whereas I would try to meet patients where they were, right? If you wanted to have full mouth reconstruction and fix every problem in your mouth, great, let's do that. If, however, you're in pain and you just want to get out of pain and deal with that and then come back and we can talk later, let's do that. So the dentistry was the same, but how we discussed it with patients was completely different. In his mind, if you weren't doing the ideal thing, he wasn't the dentist for you, which meant that he saw a lot of friends and family who wanted him to do idealized dentistry. But a lot of patients that he saw that I had seen would come back in my schedule and they'd say, he says I need to have X amount of dollars of work. And I'd say that's true. However, and we've talked about that. However, it's optional how you want to do it. And not everybody needs to have every cosmetic thing fixed in their mouth. If it's not, dentally necessary, it's optional. And so I think that's really the major difference that we had was how we presented the treatment.
So your case acceptance rate probably went way up because you're just requiring less work to be done, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was more open to modifying from the ideal. Let me put it that way, right? I don't think that what I would do in my mouth is necessarily necessary for everybody to do in their own mouths, right?
So when you bought it from him, did he stay on or did you take over?
No, well, both. I mean, he stayed on and we worked together for many years, and he had sort of this niche boutique practice within the overall practice. And I've had several associates since that, we can share patients back and forth, and it's not an issue. But with him, he just believed in ideal dentistry was what he wanted to produce, and that's what he did. And the patients that he saw loved him and wanted to see him for that, and recognized him for the craftsman he was. However, you're going to have a smaller patient base, and overall going to be, I think more than likely have a smaller, from a revenue standpoint, a smaller practice than somebody who's meeting people where they are.
So, how long were you guys at this location? Because you said you relocated multiple times. Did you stay here for a while?
Yeah, we were in that location for, I believe it was about 6 or 7 years. And then we moved to the location where I am now, which is a 3-story building. We occupied 1 floor when we moved here, and we brought on 2 more dentists. And now we take up the office takes up 2 of the 3 levels. Soon it will probably take up all 3 levels, and it's grown steadily every year. So it's been great.
Are you targeting like retail areas like with high visibility and a lot of street traffic and like good anchor tenants, or is it more like an office complex?
Great question. Because again, I've made some mistakes. I've learned some things, right? We don't make mistakes, we learn things. So yeah. My first location, the 800 square foot office, was in a strip mall next to Smoky's Superette. So kind of a really not a great location, let me put it that way. But it had a red sign that said dentist above the door, right? My second location was in a medical center, which meant I was buried on the 3rd floor in some, big brick building with no visibility. And then that's when I really learned, once I learned I better pay attention to the business of the business, right? And I started to do some research and learning and coaching. So the building I have now is right on the corner behind a gas station where I've got a 3-story building where there's great visibility and huge signage, right? So it's only a few blocks away from my second location, which was only a few blocks away from my first location. But I've learned now that it's there's just some things that you can do to put some wind in your sails, right? And as you know, real estate has been a huge piece. Like having the visibility has been great. Also, having control of the building that I'm in has been fantastic.
You own this building?
I do, yeah.
Yes.
And like I said, we've gone from 1 level to 2 levels, and we take up the entire office building now. And so we've grown into the space, which has been, it's been great. It's been fantastic.
So it sounds like you've kind of focused, like you started your dental practice, and you've grown, like you've scaled that company within the confines of those walls. And then you've also spent a lot of time when working on tech companies. And there seems to be like a lot of people that will, as they grow their dental company, they think, hey, I can replicate this. I want to go start more, and they do like a DSO model. But you've kind of taken a different approach. Why do you think you've been like more gravitated towards the tech approach than the actual like brick and mortar location approach?
Well, great question. And I did buy a second location, and I did sell the majority of my practices to Dental Care Alliance, which is a DSO, about 3 years ago. And the short answer is because I like challenge, which means I like to do things the hard way, basically. Yeah. And I, frankly, to be blunt, I thought I wasn't that excited about buying a bunch of dental practices. It wouldn't produce a challenge for me, but I love inventing things. I'm an inventor at heart, and I'm a change agent. I like changing things, and so creating solutions for the industry and helping move the industry to be more modern is really my core passion. Is I like to see what's possible in the profession, and I don't want to just create that for a few offices or a dozen offices. I want to help move the entire industry, which to me is a challenge that gets me out of bed and excited.
That's cool. And so I know you wrote the book, The Patient First Manifesto. When did you start having the idea for that? When did you actually start? When did that come about? And how long did it take you to write that? What year was that?
Well, it was right in the middle of the shutdown. So I was just on the verge of selling my first tech company, and I like you mentioned at the top of this discussion, I've been involved in quite a few tech companies, and what I've really realized is that there's a tidal wave of convenience that's crashed over the entire world. You can order everything from a car to a house to a spouse within an hour online, right? But dentistry and healthcare in general hasn't kept up, and I feel like in the 20 years that I've been a dentist, the clinical quality has just been transformed. The ability to create great care or even good care has been transformed to make it so much easier today than when I got out of dental school 20 years ago. But the actual experience from the patient's perspective has not changed. And so as I was getting ready to sell this company, I basically went for a walk, and it sounds silly, but it's true. The entire book came to me when I went for a walk, on a walk that I do all the time around my office. I sat down and I wrote down the title chapters, and I got to writing, and 10 days later I had this book. Wow. And it was basically, I think, the culmination of a lot of maybe subconscious thinking that I've been doing about the disconnect between the way patients view dentistry and the way and not just dentistry, healthcare in general, the way that patients view healthcare and the way that providers view healthcare, and how to correct it and what we should do about it. And that's how the book came about.
You ever heard of the book Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman?
I've heard of the book. I haven't read it.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. It sounds like it's a similar theme. Essentially, he starts out giving examples of dentists and dental offices as his very first real life example. And just about how, obviously there's a huge obstacle that you have to overcome in the dental industry because nobody looks forward to it. It's the last thing, it's dreaded, right? They use it as idioms, as things you don't want to do. And so he had this experience with going to the dentist where he said like the whole thing was very pleasant. They were very tech savvy. They emailed out a form ahead of time to fill it out. So when he walked in, he could just go straight in, and he was just blown away. And so it sounds like there's a lot of themes there, like in the Patient First manifesto, just in terms of like focusing on the patient experience.
Absolutely. And I have experiences like you mentioned where like my wife went to an eye doctor and we switched eye doctors, even though the eye doctor that we used to see was literally in our dance classes from when we got married. Right. So this guy was like, great guy. But then my wife went to an eye doctor and came home and said, I made an appointment with our new eye doctor. And I was like, did the last guy say something sexist or like, what did he do to make you mad? Right. Well, as it turned out, she heard that this new eye doctor didn't have to dilate your eyes with the drops. Right. And my wife hates getting those eye drops. And so she switched this new technology, frankly, from the patient's perspective is transformative. But my guess is that from an eye doctor's perspective, it doesn't do anything different than if you drop the droplets in somebody's eyes, right? In fact, it's probably in their mind a huge expense that they don't have to do because the patients can just wear some sunglasses for a few hours, right? But it caused my wife not only to change, but she set me up with this new eye doctor, right? And because I'm in dentistry, we don't see those opportunities oftentimes, right? That eye doctor did, which caused us to, as a family, to change, even though we had a personal connection to the eye doctor that we went to. And then in the book, I have a lot of stories about how I get slapped in the face by patients, right? The very first story, I did an extraordinary amount of work. I talked to this patient's mother, was a retired hygienist, multiple times, where she was crying, and I ended up restoring her front teeth. It was a tremendous amount of work and energy. And then when I delivered the restorations, I gave the patient a mirror, and she's just crying tears of joy about how her life has changed because of her new smile. And then I see that she wrote a 5-star Google review, and I'm like, of course she did. I did a great job, and I click on the link, and my heart just sank because she said, "I love Lake Minnetonka Dental. They always run on time, and they have the best coffee." Didn't even mention that I did anything to her teeth. Wow. And that, at the time, for a dentist, that's a punch in the gut, right? But I realized, reflecting on it, that's really in that patient's mind, the exceptional dentistry was expected, right? Yeah. So to get the result, she already had that result in her brain, but she didn't expect to have great coffee or for us to run on time. And that really, those experiences like that I detail in the book are really kind of
just curious.
What's that?
What kind of coffee is it?
It's a Keurig coffee pot that I bought. I was walking through Target and I saw the thing. I'm like, yeah, then people could get whatever they want. I bought it. It's like $80, right?
That's hilarious.
I've gotten so many reviews on this stupid coffee pot, right? And I think that's really the disconnect. For me as a provider and most other providers, you're like, the space that you occupy, right? It makes a big difference in the patient's experience. But from a clinical quality, the coffee I serve has absolutely no correlation to the quality of dentistry that I deliver, except for the fact that maybe if they're more comfortable, they're going to jump around less on me, right? Yeah. But in the patient's eyes, it is really impactful. And so I think it's time to expand our definition of quality of care in healthcare in general, definitely in dentistry, to include the patient experience.
All right. And so how does this correlate with what you're doing at Upgrade Dental? When did you decide, and I know that's an educational platform, but what year did you launch that? And how many of these themes are reoccurring between Upgrade Dental and what you talk about in the book?
So Upgrade Dental, we launched in the beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic. And it is, like you said, an educational platform. I really look at my work as divided into a 3-pronged strategy to help move the industry forward. One is educational, because if the biggest barrier to dentistry getting to where it could be, I believe, is the inertia, to break through the inertia of apathy of not doing something. And so that requires educating people, and that's what Upgrade Dental is all about. It's about getting people ready and breaking through the inertia to enact the change, the positive change to move the industry forward. So education is the first prong. The second prong is innovation. As you mentioned, I'm parts of some very innovative companies in dentistry, about 10 of them. We're launching a platform called ToothApps that brings together all the best applications in dentistry into one platform, kind of like the App Store or the Google Play Store, but for dentistry. Cool. And then the third prong is standardization, which is another, I believe it's a key part of innovation for us to actually remove the friction that's necessary to innovate in a way that people can actually execute on that innovation. We need to remove the barriers and get the industry aligned. And so the three prongs that I work on are education, innovation, and standardization. And in my world, the educational arm is Upgrade Dental.
Okay. And so let's talk about Upgrade Dental a little bit more. Like, what are the types of things that you're teaching? I mean, how much of it is, chairside versus business related, versus patient experience?
Great question. So we do a lot, but it's all focused on really the patient experience. So I for example, I have a course on it's called we have a product called the Upgrade Dental Prep System, which is how to prep any tooth in less than 2 minutes, probably at a higher level than you are now, because it's all systematized, right? I think one of the clinical inefficiencies that people have is they look at every tooth like a unique snowflake to uncover, right? I think if you've done 50,000 crowns, there's two ways to approach that. You can either have done the same preparation 50,000 times, which means you've practiced it 50,000 times, and 50,001 is just another trip around the tooth, right? Or you've done you've tried to improve upon it, or every time you've gone to it, it's been 50,000 different experiences, and 50,001 is just like doing your first one. And I prefer the first way. Let's make incremental improvements to which, as Einstein has told us, that compounding is the most powerful,
seventh greatest wonder of the world or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most powerful force in the universe, right?
Most powerful force in the universe, yeah.
And so if we get a little bit better each time, we're going to be massively more effective over time. And we can apply that to how you prep teeth. We can also apply it to things like your schedule, how you run a meeting. And so Upgrade Dental, we're bringing on actually a bunch of faculty members now that will train things that dentists don't have the ability today to have access to. For example, the average dental office will take an employee, a team member, who's maybe an assistant or a hygienist, and promote them to office manager. Well, that employee may be a great assistant, but knows nothing about how to lead, manage, or hold a team accountable, right? So we're giving those tools to the dental team to be able to if you take them from a peer status and promote them to a leader, we give them the tools so that they can actually lead and manage a team. Things like that I think are missing in the profession. I am really excited. In late January, I'm going to be doing a new 16-week modular course on basically how to run an effective practice that I'm in the midst of putting together now, and so I can't talk too much about it. But I'm really excited because I think it's the kind of thing where regardless of where you are in your practice, you'll become massively more productive if you go through because I think it's the first course that I'm aware of that's actually been focused on how to be an insanely productive dentist.
No, I love that. And so what kind of books would you recommend people read that you've read that have been influential for you?
Oh, we were just talking about books before. I mean, I think there's some great ones out there. My favorites are, it depends on what you mean. If you mean like business books or like I do.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I would consider business books, educational books, self-development books, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think Traction is a great book. Gino Wickman's book about basically teaches you how to lead a team, how to run effective meetings, which I think is completely underappreciated, the effectiveness of how to run an efficient meeting. So that's a great one.
And then also, I mean, it talks a lot about systems, right? I mean, you were mentioning systems earlier. I think it talks a lot about just defining, because we're reading it too. We haven't finished it, but a lot of what you do, and also defining what you don't do, which is equally important.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'm reading a great book right now on defining moments, on how to create moments that are impactful in your business and in your life. I think that is something that I'll bring to the practice, because there's, let's say somebody like a new patient, right? We have that sort of impactful moment that's engineered at my practice, but somebody, when you deliver veneers, for example, in a dental practice, that should be an architected moment, that because it regardless of what you do, there's going to be a lasting impression on that moment for the patient, right? So you can either roll the dice and leave it up to chance, or you can engineer that moment to be impactful in a positive way. And even negative, like we always do things, and now I'm thinking about them, I think that's that. So I think, when it comes to like a patient experience perspective, that's a great book. It's called Defining Moments. There's just, I love there's a lot of really good business books out there.
You mentioned also
those are my two big ones.
Storybrand by Donald Miller.
Yeah, it's a great one too. I don't know about how effective for the average dental practice.
Oh, really?
I think that for business in general, marketing in general, absolutely. I love that book, Storybrand. I've been through the Don Miller course down in Nashville. But dental practices, frankly, marketing for dental practice should be easy. It comes down to taking care of people and asking people for referrals, which is different than the Storybrand experience. But so for business in general, I love Storybrand. Dental practice, I think it's less necessary for, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what podcasts are you listening to?
Oh, I'm a big Scott Galloway fan of the Prof G podcast, but he talks about just business in general and macro trends. I'm an idea guy, and so I love looking at outside industries and applying them to dentistry. And I think Scott Galloway has a great one.
So give me some examples. Like because that sounds interesting. I'm probably going to check it out too. What's the most recent podcast that you listened to from him about?
Well, so I'm working a lot on interoperability in dentistry. So, that means I believe it's a philosophical wrong that if you're a patient and you're going to move from Minneapolis to Oklahoma, you can't just push a button and download your information and have the next dentist upload it, or have the dentist just access that information. So I'm actively working on interoperability in dentistry. So I have a bias, obviously, when I'm listening to these things. And the last one he had on, frankly, was about blockchain and NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And that is, those are technologies that I'm looking to incorporate into our interoperability in dentistry. And so they had somebody talking about that.
Yeah, explain how that would work. So, and then I know that NFTs, people just their eyes glaze over. They don't really know what it means. Essentially, it's just like the original copy of something, right? I mean, is that a good way to sum it up?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think right now it's being just like Bitcoin was probably the first blockchain technology, right? Now NFTs are another blockchain technology. I look at NFTs as like a digital signature. So it's an authentication, right? And so what that would look like in dentistry is that you could have an NFT for your dental record, right? That would be the digital authentication, which is decentralized, so nobody owns it, right? And everybody has transparency into that is your dental record. They can't see into it. So there's an authentication.
So you're saying they'll be able to see the dental record via an NFT, but they won't be able to see the contents of that. So in order to get that, they'll need your key.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's simplifying it a bit. But if you think about, like, if you buy, I'm a big Star Wars fan, right? So if I buy, which I have, Star Wars posters, which are signed by like a bunch of cast members, right? It comes with like a seal of authenticity. So that, or at least you think, right, that this has been, that has been authenticated by somebody who is in the industry. Like that's what the NFT does. It's the authentication of that So digital, and the reason why I mentioned that is that when it comes to artwork, people are now selling digital NFTs, and we see that these digital NFTs are already, I mean, digital transactions for things that are seemingly, for me, irrelevant are already there. Like my son plays Fortnite or these other Roblox game, and people spend money to get their avatar to have, you know, a unicorn horn or whatever, right? So those are already things that are going on. Now, with the NFT, you could have Michael Jordan's jersey on your avatar because he designed that jersey. Things like that, right? That's the way the right now how NFTs are is you can buy this digital asset like Jack from Twitter's first tweet went for millions and millions of dollars, right? Because now with NFTs and the blockchain, we can authenticate that was his first tweet, which was in his account. He took it out, and now you can buy it, and now it's yours.
Now, technically, you could copy and paste that, right? But it's just not the original, and you can prove that's not the original one. That's where the value comes, right?
Exactly. You can come to my house and take a picture of my poster with all the signatures, print it off high quality. It probably looks like the exact same thing, but it's not. And because it's not, it inherently has more value. But when it comes to the dental record, obviously, we're not going to let people to take copies of your record. It's the authentication that allows for secure transfer of information, but also convenient transfer of information. And so I think that rightfully so, blockchain and NFTs are getting a lot of attention, but I don't think most people understand the underlying technology that's going to open up for real estate, right? I mean, because a lot of these industries are archaic. I mean, I look at like the deed that you get for my building I'm in.
It
looks like
it's painful.
Exactly. It's painful, it's expensive, it's slow, and probably easy to counterfeit, right? Versus an NFT, which would be cheaper, easier to authenticate, and better all the way around, and decentralized. So, I think that's one of what's really happened now, especially with Bitcoin, is that they're trying to get away from the centralized banks having all the authority and things like that too. But in dentistry, I think, taking major concepts, macro trends like that, and applying it to the dental industry is one of the things that I like to do. And so Galloway's podcast gets a lot of insights into different things like that.
Yeah, super helpful. What else? Anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
No, I think I don't know if there's other healthcare providers out there who would like to get a copy of the book. You can get it for free. You just have to pay for shipping. Just go to patientfirstbook.com.
Okay, I'll write that down. Patientfirstbook.com. Okay. And is that a good way for people to get in touch with you as well, or do you want to leave anything else for people?
Yeah, if they want to, you can go to my website. It's just my name, BryanLaskin.com. That kind of has all my major initiatives that I'm working on now.
All your 15 different projects that are going on.
Maybe 10 of the 50.
Cool, man. Well, hey, listen, thanks so much. You're doing a lot. You're doing a lot for the industry. You're pushing things, you're pushing the needle, you're trying to change things. And yeah, definitely appreciate that. And it's cool to get your perspective and your optimism.
Well, and I just love what you're doing. I mean, it's fun to talk with somebody like yourself who's doing really cool things in their industry and from a broader perspective, right? Because I think this type of content doesn't necessarily go really hand to hand with what you're doing day to day, but it also on a high level does. So I appreciate you bringing this type of content to a broader audience.
Oh yeah. I appreciate that. Thanks very much. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.